Hello, everyone. It's Laurie and Jennie again doing the MoonLore series. And today we are talking about the Cancer full moon that occurs on December, tell me again, Jennie.
29th,
29th.
10:28 p.m. Eastern
Oh,
Daylight Time.
okay. So what we want to start with is just reminding you of the full cycle that we're dealing with. At the full moon, we are at the full illumination of the cycle. The cycle, the lunation, the full lunation cycle always starts at the new moon when the sun and the moon come together. When we look out there, we can't see the moon. We can't see it because it's lined up with the sun. So when you look at the sun, you're not going to see that moon. So that's the beginning of the cycle. And every day from that point of the new moon, the moon in the sky at night gets a little bigger and a little brighter until we come to this point 2 weeks after the new moon where we come to the full moon. So anything else you want to say just about that cycle, Jennie?
No, that was great.
Okay. All right. So the full moon now, the one we're talking about now, is in the sign of Cancer. So we want to think about that. The sun is in Capricorn, the moon is in Cancer. What do these two planets, these two signs represent? And how do we look at that as a full illumination? How do you think about how the signs play into this, Jennie?
I think a good starting point is just to say we're in Capricorn season. That means the sun is in Capricorn. So we start with that. And then the moon in Cancer is just like that's that part of this Capricorn season, so to speak. So just in terms of where we're at seasonally, it's like we're in the winter. So we're kind of dealing with this, all right, we're early in winter now, and we've got a kind of a little bit of a long road ahead of us. We kind of have to be willing to work hard and deal with a little bit of loneliness and isolation. So that's kind of the Capricorn end. And then when you start thinking about the moon in Cancer, you just start bringing that opposition into play. And the moon is quite powerful in Cancer. But what kinds of things does Cancer symbolize?
Family, home,
Mm-hmm.
all that nurturing connection on that family kind of level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's kind of, those are great key words for this, thinking about this polarity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why don't you pull up the chart?
Okay.
And we can take a look at that. You know, it's interesting to me, this particular opposition between the sun and the moon, just that whole idea of Capricorn and Cancer. You know, Capricorn you think of as the authority, kind of the father figure from that perspective. And the Cancer is thought of as the nurturer, sort of the mommy position.
Right.
So that position is an interesting one.
Well, also too, what you're kind of hinting at is they're both cardinal signs, and cardinal signs are always the initiators. They're all correlate with the beginning of seasons, so we think of them as they start stuff. They like to get it going, and that's kind of what you think about in the sort of typical, the standardized formula for families: mom and dad get things started.
Right.
And that's still valid to think about them as initiating energy. So that's kind of. So they're both serious. They both are. I mean, people kind of underestimate Cancer, but it is pretty fierce.
Oh yeah.
And it's still a total initiator. Probably most of us can identify with maybe times when our mom was mad at us.
Right.
So let's just think about that for a second.
Right.
But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing about Cancer. I've thought about that a lot over the years, how, you know, it's a water sign. People tend to think of it as nurturing and sweet and cuddly, and it certainly can be all that stuff, but it's also that protective fierceness that that maternal, on the flip side of that maternal, you know,
it has claws, right?
Right.
I mean, no matter whether you're thinking about a mother bear or the crab, they have claws.
Right.
So.
And yeah, it's interesting in the middle of the winter to have this startup energy. And I think it's so great right after the solstice to kind of give us this push of getting something started, something started that's serious and authoritative, and yet brings in the heart.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. That's nice.
You know,
Laurie.
on a personal level, to look at how that plays out in your own chart, and what is it that you're being called to produce, to create, to start up, that has that heart and the protective part.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah. Well, and also too, I think, so the other thing we always like to look at right away is like, okay, we have the full moon. Well, what is it relating to in this chart? And the only really, I mean, it obviously opposes the sun, and it opposes loosely Mercury too. But the only other thing it does is it sextiles Uranus. So you have this pretty easy flow of energy, this opportunity available to us. That is a key word for the sextiles, opportunity. And what's that? What do you think that opportunity is about?
That's a good question. You know, well, Uranus is about waking up to something. So the thing with sextiles, I really like sextiles because they are, yes, it's opportunity, it's possibility, it's potential. It's not like a trine is a gift. With a sextile, you've got to take the action. And because this is so action oriented, it you know, gives more, you're more apt to take that action, I guess.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important with sextiles to pay attention to them, because they're not, it's not something that's going to fall in your lap. But it's like, what is it that's trying to awaken you to this process of startup energy? And if you think of the chart as being the chart on, you know, in the Eastern time zone, so it's the chart of Washington, D.C. You know, what is it that is trying to be woke here?
Yeah.
This is, you know, this being in the 9th house of higher understanding, higher values, this being the house of the collective, the people. So there's something about waking up to how our higher understanding of the world seriously supports care for others.
Yeah.
There's something in that.
Yeah, and I was thinking as you were talking about the sextiles, it's a little bit like a nudge, you know, it's like a little bump, but you still have to do something about it. So there's that. But I think there's just a real reframing of how we think about things. And that's what we're really being asked to do based on everything that's happened in 2020. And Uranus and Taurus, the awakener of the planetary energy, just waking up to we're all living here together in this giant ecosystem, and everything has an impact. So there's that piece. As far as Washington, D.C., well, it reflects that, like who's going to be taking the lead in this country, and will there be a possibility of being more inclusive of people, of the environmental systems at that level of leadership? And it's, you know, this is a difficult time in the United States. There's I think there's a lot of work to be done, and a lot remains to be seen, and there's not really an easy answer, but those are some of the questions being poised, I think.
Yeah. And the wake up energy it's in that 9th house, and it's in Taurus, which is, earth-based energy, feminine energy. So there's a lot of waking up potential in this full moon. That's beautiful. I'm glad to see that. Now, another thing that we like to talk about in these videos is kind of the pathway that the moon has taken from the most recent new moon until this full moon. And the most recent new moon was December 14th, I believe. And that was the solar eclipse. That was such a powerful solar eclipse. So now, since then, the moon has basically, it started it conjunct the moon in some of the last degrees of Sagittarius. So it's gone over all of the planets except Venus. The rest of them, it's all touched off. So it's like it hasn't quite gathered everybody into the mix of this illuminating wake up energy. It's still, you know, there's still some opinionated values down here in the home. This is
Yeah.
that opinionated uncle on your Zoom call.
Yeah, totally. I'm having a laugh about that. Where it's just like all opinion and bombastic, and it's in the fourth house, so it's family and home, but it's not necessarily grounded in facts and and the hard work of data, of
Oh,
digging up the right data.
that's so
So,
interesting. It's sort of like, okay, I like this. Like these planets, the Saturn and Jupiter, just moved into Aquarius. It's like,
mhm.
okay, we're waking up, we're on our path, we're moving ahead, we're moving ahead. Yes, there's still plenty of scary stuff that we're dealing with in this country, but we are moving ahead. And yet what's left behind that we haven't gathered up? It's somebody that we can't get out of the house.
That's hilarious.
There's
Yeah,
something in that. Seriously,
yeah.
there's just
Hmm.
sometimes I like, sometimes astrology just comes out with the simplest little things that are right on. And
Yeah.
it's someone who
Hmm.
has to leave a house that is neglecting doing so.
Yeah. And then the other end of that, we're talking about that, Venus conjunct the South Node, both in Sagittarius, and then again in this Eastern chart, we have at the other end of that, the North Node in Gemini conjunct the Midheaven. And all I really want to say about that was all of the lunations we've worked with this year have a big focus on communication, one way or another. And it's again that two-way street of talking, but also of listening. And it's just a real emphasis on, while everything else has been going on in this crazy year, there just keeps being this emphasis on like, yeah, but we got to figure out how to talk about this people. Like, hey, we got to figure out how to, have conversations and just listen to each other. And that's been a highlight of each of these lunations in the past few months.
Yeah.
So, and in this one, it's like in Gemini, and Mercury is now in Sagittarius, so it has serious things to talk about.
Right.
So,
And,
yeah.
and it's sort of like the opinions of the past need to be
Mm.
released into the outward conversation.
Mm.
Again,
Yeah.
it's that uncle or somebody that won't leave the house when it's time for them to leave. That's the past. It's really, the
Mm.
story is done, but there's still the traveling to bringing the resolution into the to the fully illuminated place of
Yeah.
the
Mm.
midheaven. I don't know if, yeah.
Mm. No, it's good because I was thinking the just one last piece about was just that Venus brings in that, like, you want to be nice to that uncle, or and but it's like, yeah, sometimes nice doesn't, sometimes you need to be more factual,
Right.
and like it doesn't mean you have to be rude,
Right.
but it might be time to kind of say, you know what.
Yeah. Yeah.
So good luck with that, everybody.
Patting him on the
Yeah,
head
yeah.
and allowing him to have his bombastic, offensive opinions, that's the past.
Mm,
Let it go, right?
that,
It's part of the story. Yeah, that's an interesting thing.
yeah.
Okay, now the other thing with all of this that we want to think about is in the larger cycle, which is generally a 6-month cycle, we talk about when we had the last new moon in Cancer. And that gets a little tricky, Jenny was pointing out to me earlier, because there were actually 2 new moons in Cancer this year. So that kind of makes you think that this resolution, the full moon being the illuminations or the resolution, it's resolving more than one, it's like resolving a whole pack of issues rather than just one.
Yeah, and also, so it's 2 new moons. The first of those new moons was June 21st, which was a very prominent solar eclipse. So you have 2 eclipses that are feeding into this full moon, and then the second one was July 20th, which was a late Cancer new moon. So you really have, it's almost like that whole month of June, July, I mean really July, but a little bit of June is kind of the events that happened at that time, the fruition's coming to those events. And with eclipses, it makes it even a little bit more prominent. And then what I immediately thought of was like, well, this thing is on the 29th. So we're right before New Year's. So for once, the astrology is lining up with the calendar year, where there's this final kind of showing or culmination on the 29th. And 2 days later, we have New Year's. And then we really are starting a new year on the 1st in a lot of ways. Mars will have moved fully beyond the
Yeah.
shadow period that it visited earlier, before it retrograded. It's going to get past that, and we're going to get release some of those things that have been pulling on us for all these months.
Yeah.
So it's, to me, this is like an extra powerful moon. And personally, for all of us, it's a great time to think about, what do you want to bring to New Year's? Because New Year's resolutions take on a little more meaning this year, I think, than other years. So it's a pretty cool opportunity.
I think that's really true. There's a bunch of different things that, yeah, we really are turning a page. With the Saturn and Jupiter having finally escaped from Capricorn for good. And, you know, these things really do kind of signify we're done. We're done with 2020. And that does not mean, oh my God, 2021, it's going to be all unicorns and sunshine. There's a lot of work ahead to clean up the mess that's been created in 2020 and
yeah, I think that's symbolized by Pluto still going to hang on in Capricorn for a while. And so there's still going to be that Capricornian work, which is to do with the authoritarian, aspects, patriarchal aspects, all these things. So that kind of shows that. But well, I guess we're probably close to wrapping up.
Well, how about personal charts?
Yeah, except for that. Yep.
Where does it fall in yours?
The first house. And actually that full moon is going to be right on my Venus in Cancer. So
the full moon is your 1st to 7th house. So for all of you, before, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you, Jenny, but just look and find in your whole sign house chart, look and find where is Cancer, where's Capricorn, and in those areas of your life is where you will have this opportunity to see clearly where this path has brought you, just that whole idea of what is illuminated. So for you, Jenny, in 2020, what from your relationship to yourself, what's been the illumination in that area?
Yeah, well, first of all, just having it fall in my first house is that conversation about just the self. But the second piece for me is it's hitting a sensitive point in my chart because it's landing directly on Venus. So it becomes an even more personal or poignant place. And I just think, I don't know. I just think that there's been a lot of personal things that have happened this year for me. And there's sort of this sense of establishing myself and, or maybe it's that establishing, we each have to have a relationship with ourselves. And we don't really talk about that a whole lot in our society, but it's actually the primary relationship. It's like, how do you take care of yourself? How do you complete yourself so that you can show up for your relationships in a much more whole, healthy way, rather than out of a place of need? It's more like showing up from a place of offering. And there's been a lot of work on personal relationships for me this year. So it's appropriate. So, yeah.
So
what about you?
Well, for me, it's the same as this chart. It's between the moon itself. The full moon is in my 11th house, which the way I think of the 11th house is, it's community, but it's also, it's the community where you receive love, as Noel Till talks about that polarity as receiving love in the 11th house, giving love in the 5th house. And, I feel like there's been a lot, I will give some thought to this, actually.
Yeah, I know, me too.
The illumination of community coming from the area of giving love and creativity. So I think this is really, for me, it's related to the work I do, the community that I am building on Patreon, on YouTube, in the world with my work. It's very much that.
Yes, and sharing with me, which I really appreciate, Laurie. So.
Oh, Jen,
yes,
you're the best.
You are. It is really nice working with you. So I'm gonna stop sharing so we can say goodbye.
All right. And all of you out there, look at that in your own chart and give it some thought. What is it that is being illuminated in the Cancer house that is from the work that you've been doing in the Capricorn house. I think that's really it. There's been so much work with that cluster of planets that's been in Capricorn this year particularly. You've done a lot of work, all of you, all of us have done a lot of work in the area that Capricorn is in our charts. And right now, at the very end here of 2020, this full moon really does, it illuminates, it really can illuminate the gift of all the work you've done. I think thinking about it that way.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to think about it. And I agree, like this, it's just been so much to do and think about, and all of us have just had the ground rippling under our feet. So if nothing else, this is a great time to just, you know, be kind to yourself. Let that Cancer full moon, it's this sort of patient, loving kindness. So think about that. And I hope everyone has a decent holiday. So.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you. And we'll do this again in 2 weeks for the first new moon of 2021.
Ooh. All right.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right, bye.